This book. Just finished this book. You know, I spent the last 10, 15 years of my life being obsessed with nonfiction and personal development. Personal development's like my whole life in my career. And I've now become so obsessed with fiction, particularly fiction that takes you on a wild ride of how we can play a part in our own demise. That's what fascinated me about this book, is about how we play a part in our own demise. I did a live recently talking about how if you're being abused or if you're someone who's been in a really difficult situation, you have every right to be angry at the person who has contributed to you being in the situation. And where we always want to look is how I participate. How I participate in my own demise, how I participate in my own success. That's where we have power. Being right about how the world's unfair, about how someone treated you wrong or they shouldn't have done that or whatever, doesn't change anything. As right as you are, I might have so much compassion for you, I would. But what is so interesting to me is like where we have power, where we have influence. In this book, I love this book, because it demonstrated this beautiful story, well, tragic story really, of how easily we participate in our own demise. You know, things like COVID, all the rules in COVID, things that happened in our lives or things that we've seen change over the years in negative ways. Why do they change? Well, they change because we allow one step at a time, one little step at a time, and suddenly we go, how did we get here where we can't hug our loved ones? You know, these things include our participation. As much as we think, you know, to be mad at the government or our spouse or whoever, we play some role. And in this, you know, what is it called? Not a utopian. What's the opposite? Dystopian. This dystopian book. It was so beautifully written to show how easy it is for us to go along with what we know deep down is not okay. And once they went along this path, there's a story of one particular character here who falls in love with someone. They realize that love is all they have. And that comes back to, you know, what I do for a living. All the things that are going on in the world that you're scared of or you think are unjust, perhaps they are. And also, how much of those things are a distraction from the love in our own life, from the lack of love in our own life, and pursuing that. You know, when people are at their worst, when life is the worst, and you still have love or connection, most difficulties really shrink. Really, really shrink. And I think so many of us have it backwards. So many of us are trying to make sure our life is so good, and then I'll pursue love. I got to make sure I have enough money. I got to have the right career. I got to have all these things, and then I'll pursue love. I met my wife when I was broke. Wasn't sure what I was going to do for work. Left one profession. Wasn't sure what my next profession was going to be. And with her love and with love, taking action on my future became easier. Dealing with hardship became easier. And I think so many of us have forgotten that when we are in a relationship and when we have love in our life, everything is better. And it demonstrated this in this book so beautifully. And I think what's crazy about the book is too, George Orwell somehow writes these elaborate books, and then it doesn't come together until like the last page of the book, which I think is extraordinary to have that kind of skill. And so I've been obsessed with classics lately. I'm going to be reviewing a book every couple weeks or so whenever I finish it, however long it takes, and sharing my thoughts on it. But highly recommend this. I really highly recommend this book if you haven't read it already. Many people probably already have because it's such a classic. But it beautifully describes how in this book there's crazy things that happen. You can't believe that society could be like this. And I believe you can see ways that society could turn into this if we let it. If we let it being the key thing. And that's why I think it's so important to look at whatever we have a complaint about in our life. Whatever we're complaining about in life right now. We could either dig deeper into that complaint, talk about how unjust it is and how unfair it is, or we could look at how we could participate in changing it. how maybe we're even participating in it happening. Perhaps the breakthrough or the big change is not going to fix the problem. It's not participating in the problem more. I think we overthink this personal development stuff sometimes. Sometimes the best thing you can do in your relationship, your career, is not even to do something amazing, but to stop doing what doesn't work. To just stop doing what doesn't work. You know, you keep finding yourself in an argument with your partner, your boss. Instead of trying to make those conversations great, what if you could just stop making them worse? Slightly, even. And then as you did that, things started to improve a little bit. And as you did that, you started to see a new window of behavior. I really believe in making the small shifts bit by bit, both positively and negatively. You know, you look at how your life is now and your health or something like that, and it's in such a poor state. It's like, well, that happened with little bits, little steps, overlooking important things bit by bit. Well, the same can happen in reverse. I want to improve my relationships, my health, my career. Well, what if I aimed low, really low, and took one small little microscopic action a day towards this, towards my own health, my own relationship? Things really start to work out. The domino effect happens and you build great momentum in that area of your life. So if you haven't read this book, read this book, 1984, George Orwell. More book reviews coming up. Have a good one, you guys.